to everybody. We are live on YouTube and on Twitch. I want to welcome my tonight guests, Ben, Chow, co-founder of Jupiter Aggregator and Mercure Finance. Joe McCan, like KOL, entrepreneur, angel, investor, startup advisor, NFT collector. We can do this like for the ages. And my lovely colleague and like art NFT, let's say evangelist.
Thank you, Jovan.
Yeah, I named this panel "The Brave New World of NFTs" because I wanted to talk with you what is happening last year and beginning of this year, like how we are all evolving fast, and this fast evolving and what is happening, we have like the good and bad stuff. I want to make the combination mix today to talk about also a good stuff and like shilling how it's cool what we are doing, but also to put on the table the bad things that are happening in the space, rug pulls, scams, projects without a plan, just money. Like we can start like with you, Joe, because you are in the epicenter of all of that, and you bought a lot of NFTs at the moment.
Sure. So is the question, what is good and what's bad about NFTs at this point?
Like for me, it's like more like how you see it. So you were like you were here on Solana with collections, with art from the beginning. So how you see these new changes in the market and in the space? Are we going in the right way?
Yeah, I mean, I've probably been in the Solana NFT space, if not from the beginning, very, very close to the very beginning, and was fortunate enough to participate in a lot of the early mints for a lot of the blue chip NFTs that are out there today. I think just like in any kind of new market that exists, you're going to have a lot of speculators, you're going to have a lot of interest, and you're also going to have a lot of people that are unfortunately taking advantage of this kind of new art/technology innovation. And so I think that as sad as it may sound that there are rug pulls or there are people out there that are, cash grabbing or conducting some sort of scam, unfortunately, that's required for the health of a market to actually thrive longer term. We actually need to start to build in, whether it's community-related trust across the tooling in the ecosystem so that we can get a better sense of, fraudulent NFTs versus authentic ones. I know SolSea has done a number of things to try to combat this, and I think they're actually leading in this space, to be totally honest. So where we're headed, I mean, look, we've just barely begun. I mean, NFTs and Solana aren't even a year old yet, and the kind of expansion and creative capabilities of what you can actually do with NFTs has barely begun. We are starting to now see big brands start to participate in the space. We're seeing new types of media be supported, etc.
Giovanni, sorry, Joe. Giovanni, can you turn down the headset volume? I think there is a lot of noise in your...
Yeah. I did.
Oh,
there we go.
Yes, that's
much better. Thank you. So yeah, so basically, like, just to kind of wrap it all up, is that I would actually say that things that are controversial or things that are negatively impacted in the NFT space, just like anything on social media or the internet, that actually gets a lot more attention than I think a lot of the good that's actually happening in the space. And so if you zoom out a bit, you can see a massive proliferation of not only tools and infrastructure, but also artists, creativity that are happening in the NFT space, particularly in Solana. So I think that this is a net positive. We've got a lot more growth ahead of us in the space.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And Ben, like you as a founder in Solana and somebody who were like in gaming and before that, like in a Web 2 space, like how you see all of this craziness, what we are having now in a Solana and NFT and Web 3 space.
Yeah, sure. So, I think the most interesting thing is this, and I think that this might be one of the most important problems to solve is this idea of this permissionless, decentralized world, where anyone, we don't, nobody wants to be sort of a gatekeeper to allow anyone to participate in any of these markets. But at the same time, there's a when great projects attract a lot of users and audience, there's this natural transference of trust. And we see this a lot with Jupiter, where people they trust Jupiter, they use Jupiter a lot, and so they assume that a lot of the tokens and markets that are on Jupiter are also sort of should have that same level of trust, right? And it's sort of not quite the case, because we're not trying to be gatekeepers for any market or any token, right? And so I think one of the important things is helping people to understand that and set those expectations. Like Joe said, I think we're really early, and I think I see all of us as pioneers. Where even if you're an NFT buyer or a token holder, we're not, the markets and crypto isn't sort of this super safe environment, like the regulated markets are in the US, right? So it's like, you do have to do your own research, but we're all in it together to try to figure out what is the best way forward.
Vito, and you? What do you have to say as for this? I saw that you are typing something.
No, I was typing. Just there is so much noise coming from you. I don't know where you're actually standing.
I think
right now.
There's some background noise.
You might want to try to leave the room that's broadcasting and maybe go to a separate room. That might be it.
Yeah, I don't know. Are you in the central
Vito,
space?
you can. Yeah. You can continue. I will get back then, in 5 minutes. Just continue with the team. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Sure. So, Jovan left me in a kind of a pretty, a difficult topic to handle.
I'll ask you the same question then. So, what are you seeing in terms of, you've been early on in the NFT space, right? And especially in Solana, especially what you guys have done with SolSea and all art. So can you talk a little bit about where things have been and now where we're at today and where we're going to be going?
Yeah, well, I can tell you that what has been happening at the beginning is, we thought that the space in the NFT sector, especially in Solana, will actually start with one-on-one NFTs, like the art pieces, and the art itself is something that we were looking to kind of transform into the NFTs and then move that into the virtual reality with VRL art. But what actually happened is that a lot of people, let's say late July, beginning of August, started asking for an open NFT marketplace. So we decided that the marketplace that we already started building was something that we want to actually move into the openness. Right? We had a marketplace, but it was kind of a closed down marketplace, like work in progress project. But we said, okay, let's stop all of this and let's immediately create an open NFT marketplace on Solana, because most of the community was asking that. Actually, Joe, this is how we met. We started talking about the open NFT marketplace, and then we started the big conversation. But what happened at the beginning of the space, let's say in August or early September, was that openness was so much demanded, but actually openness was something that people were kind of afraid of. And when we open up SolSea, after some glitches at the beginning, and we had this openness, you can go and buy any NFT, everybody can sell, their NFTs. People started yelling that you can buy fakes on SolSea. which was completely right, because you can buy fakes because there were, scammers putting out fakes on SolSea. And we started implementing a lot of different mechanics to kind of protect people from buying fakes. But then at the same time, we were faced with a lot of different challenges, like what is a fake NFT? Like, is it something that the original author gave the right to the new buyer that has all the rights? Now, if he mints a new NFT, this is not a fake NFT. This is just a regular NFT. And all these projects started giving away all the rights to their buyers. So it was impossible to determine like what is fake, what is not fake. Do the new owners have the right to remint, or let's say copy mint the NFTs? So it was a big confusion all around the space that late September, beginning of October. And I think that at that time, verification started being a really important moment. And as Jovan mentioned, rug pulls that are happening now, it's all a matter of very early space, as Joe, you mentioned. Like, we are so early that no rules actually exist, and there are no, real determined factors that say you need to do this or that in the NFT space to be compliant or to be in line of what is considered to be regulatory approved, which is not. Hey, Jovan is back. Jovan.
Yes.
Hello. Oh, he's floating right now. Anyway, so what I was saying is that, these early days of the NFT space on Solana kind of made made us into what we are right now, like not only the SolSea but other marketplaces too. And I think the evolution that happened at the beginning, that started off with one-on-one art pieces, and then suddenly, because of the candy machine, moved into the space of let's print another 10,000 collections of PFPs. And then now we have 7 or 10 million of NFTs, created on Solana ecosystem. Now we are experiencing a slowdown in these NFTs, in new mints, and then we had a lot of rug pulls. People are afraid, and I think it will be transformed into a different space. And I actually hope that people will just slow down a little bit. Just a little, and think about what is the value of the NFT that you want to buy, and how do you also kind of judge and estimate and do due diligence on the team that is producing these NFTs, and what will be the rug pulls in the future. How many of the projects will actually rug pull, whether it's a soft rug or a hard rug? So I don't know, without Jovan to take the lead.
One of the things I was going to say is that I think you bring up a really great point, is that in the beginning, it was just such a cool experience, because if you've minted NFTs on Ethereum, it's a very different experience than if you do it on Solana, right? Solana, it just feels like a much more seamless, frictionless experience. It's very, very cheap in terms of actually minting. You don't have to worry about whether or not your transaction is going to go through in most cases. Obviously, some of the mints had so much demand that the RPC providers actually choked up and caused some discomfort for the end users. But ultimately, it was so new, and we were in addition to that, I think another aspect that really starts to factor into the concept of NFTs as a market is that the broader cryptocurrency and even global macro markets impact or influence people's decision making with respect to investing in NFTs. So right now, I saw a stat earlier today that there's a number of US tech companies that are down 50, 60, 70% from their peaks in 2021 in value. Well, that has an impact on people's decision making in investing in anything, for that matter. They experience what's called a negative wealth effect, where they see the value of their net worth going down. And so that actually influences their decision making on whether or not they want to participate in things like a new NFT mint. It doesn't mean that the NFT mints won't come back or that there's a one-to-one correlation. I just think it's that one thing that people need to recognize is that the speculative mania that may have persisted early on in the Solana NFT ecosystem was also very consistent with what was happening with the broader markets overall. And that can influence their purchase decision making. Whereas now we've seen obviously a pullback across all markets. There's a potential talk of Fed raising interest rates. There's all these other macro factors that are influencing the purchasing decision that will ultimately, I think, force us to get to the point that you're talking about, which is projects really being deliberate about the type of art they're creating, why it's unique. Projects really starting to talk about who they are, their backgrounds, so that the community feels comfortable supporting their projects, as opposed to yet another PFP project that's going to try to mint 10,000 at one Sol with no real guidance or understanding of who the team is. I think that those continue to some extent, but over the long haul, I think those are actually going to start to get weeded out by the community.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think this is true of all companies and projects, right? In a down market, right? The types of people who are looking for a quick buck to rug, right? It's just harder for them, and so they just go elsewhere, right? And what you have is just a lot of the people who stick around are like the long-term believers, the builders, the people who are going to invest in building a great community, building value, and adding to the ecosystem wherever they are. And then that quality will again attract, the next wave of people who are interested in NFTs. And when the market kind of turns again, we'll see like this huge growth, I think.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of exciting things happening in NFTs. Like I think all the people who are thinking about how to add value, how to add utility, both in the DeFi space and in gaming, is going to be really, really sick. I think it's going to be cool. So, I can't wait.
What do you think
do you
about
think the regulators will? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Vito.
No, I was just wondering when you mentioned utility NFTs, like we saw a lot of projects popping up with promising of future revenues and things like that. Do you see regulators jumping into the space saying like stop, like what you're doing is a security or not a security, like because NFTs are completely unregulated. We spoke with lawyers that told us like buying and selling of pictures is fine, but what lies behind the picture is something that it's not yet determined, right? And the usage is not yet determined. It's a promise. It's kind of a nice story. So do you think regulators will come in? I mean, both of you. I don't know.
Sure. I mean, I'll chime in quickly. So do I think regulators will come into NFTs? Yes. Do I think that they're going to be targeting whether or not an NFT is some form of, interest or income generating asset? I don't know. I think in the short term, they're probably more focused on, and this is certainly from the US perspective, they're probably more focused on the ability for money laundering to occur, which, candidly, it's unfortunate that crypto kind of gets this stain of enabling rampant money laundering when in fact, if you study the history of this, the investment banks have actually been the largest money launderers for drug cartels and terrorists, et cetera, for decades. That being said, it is an easy in for regulators to actually focus on something with respect to NFTs is going to be around, the kind of illicit utility of it. What I think is really fascinating about NFTs as an asset class is that we're talking about, for the first time, enabling something of scarce value that is programmable in nature. And so you can actually programmatically determine, which we know from things like, secondary sales and the percentages that go back to the creator, et cetera, et cetera. But more importantly, these NFTs could become, like we were talking about earlier, you stake these NFTs and you earn some sort of yield on them. That's kind of the basic canonical use case. There could be a lot of other use cases, and I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on this, Ben, eventually, is if I was to go take an NFT and stake it as collateral and want to trade it on Jupiter or some other exchange, right? Like, is that now a security, or are we just pledging a piece of art as collateral that has this programmatic access or capability associated with it?
Yeah, I mean, I like how you called it programmatic value. I think that's an important attribute to NFTs. And it's broad, it's actually defining it a lot broader than say like the ability to generate yield on it, right? Which I think is a very it's a very easy thing that people are trying out. But like, I mean, I'm more excited about I think well, in DeFi, maybe more related to gaming, but I think a lot of what will attract the next wave of people is going to be more. It's going to be some combination of experience and yield, right? And the fact that like if an NFT has a utility that's also unlocking different experiences, or like tiers of experiences, within an interesting place within the metaverse, it doesn't have to be yield generating, right? And then there's value on the open market for that, right? To that, anyone. I mean, you can let the market decide how valuable it is, but so I think that it's infinite. The possibilities are infinite, right? And being programmatic, I think, makes it even more interesting. So for sure, like we're Jupiter. We're interested in the NFT space, and we're starting to experiment and do a couple things here, because I think like it's a really like NFTs and gaming are such a big draw for crypto audiences. They're growing so fast, right? And what I think is that like, especially like these new play to earn models, right? And that means like people are going to accumulate crypto, even if you're coming in for gaming or for NFTs or the art or whatever, and you're going to eventually find your way wanting to do some level of DeFi, So if you're accumulating assets, you want to generate yield, and you may not be like a savvy investor, but you'll want to participate. And I think the one way I see like Jupiter playing a role is like being that bridge for people who want simple ways to kind of do more with their assets.
Yeah.
Cool, guys.
Jovan,
So
you back?
I'm back. Yeah.
Nice.
Can you hear me?
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I was like listening what you have to say, and it's really interesting to get this conversation, and in this special atmosphere. I really feel honored that I'm part of this. I'm so excited, really. And I don't know, like for me, what you are telling us here, it's like really important that we all see that like making mistakes or like playing around with a new stuff, it's like just a way, like a kid, like to grow, to going and growing as a system, as a space. And I think future we will laugh about this like mistakes in this part of our growing as pilgrims for
actually,
DeFi and NFTs.
I would actually say I don't even see any of these things as mistakes. I think they're maybe you can call them growing pains, but I think we're all figuring out these new models, and I would just say that like the best people, like our best users and the best people who are the ones who understand like some of these issues around rugs and things, and they're a part of the growing process. They're giving us feedback. They're helping us come up with ideas and solutions, so that like we're all solving it together. It's not a. I mean, this is one of the promises of moving to DAOs, right? It shouldn't be this I don't know, company and customer relationship where like we solve these problems and they are just the beneficiaries of the solutions we try to come up with, and it's on us. I think we all play a part in trying to come up with what are the best ways to prevent these rugs or these scams and so that the next wave of people who come in have an easier time of it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think I wouldn't even characterize them as mistakes. I think I think it's just part of the learning process of basically any new technology. I think the other thing that people need to recognize is that in a lot of cases, folks are taking a learned behavior of traditional, customer relationship with, something that they're purchasing, and they have this expectation that has existed for probably their entire life as to how that's supposed to work out. Hey, I bought this thing, I'm not supposed to get scammed, right? Well, at least here in the United States, if you go back to the 1800s, there was no consumer protection agency. There was none of this stuff was kind of in place, right? And so, even as recent as the Bernie Madoff scandal in the United States, in a highly regulated industry like finance, it was still one of the most prolific Ponzi schemes in the history of the world, right? So what I'm getting to is that part of the frustration I think a lot of people are feeling is justified, but you also have to put it into context of what we're actually trying to accomplish. I mean, we're giving a panel in VR right now. This is a fundamentally different experience and will be going forward. It doesn't mean that we can't apply some of the learned behaviors of what, a collector or a customer or a user should expect, but we should also be open to the idea that, hey, we're all kind of figuring this out together, right? And so there are going to be bumps along the road, but ultimately we're all kind of, marching to the same beat of the same drum. So like, let's do this together and all learn from it together.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I wanted to add on on what was Ben saying, like DAOs and things that are kind of fundamentally changing the whole kind of space of how do we interact between the customer and a company, or let's say provider of the service. On the previous panel, I was talking to, I don't know if you were actually listening, it's like the panel was about art and NFTs, and it turns out that a lot of these art NFT collectors and galleries, I mean, at least people that were on the panel were talking about actually joining the DAOs. And then DAOs are the ones that are kind of thinking about what they will invest next, what they will collect. Then the artists are participating together to kind of meet collectors, to organize their own art pieces as NFTs, to learn from each other. So I think we are seeing a fundamental shift from like the old types of doing business into completely new types of actually interactions that are happening in this space. And my personal view that experience not only running SolSea and other products that we have is that the difference between Web 2 and Web 3 now becomes obvious. And for me, it's like Web 2 was all about a service, and Web 3 is all about communities. And I'm not sure whether this will remain like that, or like whether communities will stay on power, let's say, and continue this trend. But like people are joining their forces in Web3 is kind of an unprecedented way of running things in space. And this is what we saw. Like, it's important, like, what is your status inside of a specific community? Maybe this goes back, like 200 years when this was important. Like, okay, what community do I belong to? Like, like, what is my role and position in this community? Now, maybe we are getting back into this position where in a digital space, we are kind of going through this phase again. But it is important that these communities are decision makers today. Like, what is happening in these DAOs determines the next step in the NFT evolution. I mean, we saw it. And, we were even late to understand this, to kind of, be there on the front lines of the actual development while running basically almost like a Web 2 service, because SolSea is a marketplace run in a kind of Web 2 way, even though it was open. Now it's kind of semi-open. So I don't know, what do you guys think about this transformation?
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really great point. So there's a couple of things I wanted to touch on. There is there is currently no clear definition of what Web3 is. Everybody, if you ask somebody, everybody will give you a different answer. But what I think, in spirit of what you're describing, is this community ownership or access is very consistent with what we're seeing more broadly in Web3. My view on Web3 is, I wrote an article about this last summer, has a lot to do with how it's effectively permissionless networks. And so on the one hand, you could look at things like DeFi and cryptocurrency as the ability to participate in these permissionless networks as a token holder. You are now actively, sort of participating or inactively participating simply by holding the token of a particular network. With respect to DAOs or NFT communities, that again is the ability for almost anybody to more or less participate. Granted, there is some gating, like if you want to get into Monkey DAO, you need to have an SMB. Okay, that's fine. But at the end of the day, there's a path for you to actually do that. And the notion that the community piece or the involvement with no real sort of gatekeeping is incredibly powerful. It's one of the reasons why my view is Web3 has a lot to do with open protocols basically being the future of the internet, and that enables folks to be building composable applications and communities on top of all of these permissionless networks, as well as things like NFTs, which are enabled by Web3 technologies. I think the last thing I wanted to point out, though, is that I've been involved in open source software for a very long time, and one of the aspects of open source that I think a lot of people are familiar with, or at least directionally familiar with, is the concept of forking. And so for those of you who do not know what this means, is you take the code, you fork it, you make like a clone of it, and now you've got kind of like your own sort of path for what you want to do with the technology. The difference is that in a lot of cases with open source technology, and I would say the open source philosophy applies to DAOs and Web3 in general, is that you can fork the code all you want, but you can't fork the community. But the opposite is also true. You can fork a community, and if the community leaves the core open source project or community, or the core open source project itself, if the community leaves that open source project tends to no longer have value. We actually saw this with Node.js and IO.js. If you want to go read about it many years ago, this is exactly what happened. Now, ultimately, what happened with that fork is the community decided to move over to this new fork of Node.js, which meant the original Node.js, effectively, its value went to zero overnight because the community was over here. Over time, the Node.js gatekeepers at the time decided to merge back the IO.js community, and now you have what everybody is familiar with today. I think we're seeing the first real example of that in Solana today with the Monkey DAO and entanglement story, where the community has decided to fork and move over towards this new approach for how royalties should be shared and how the treasury should be managed, et cetera. And hopefully there is some sort of resolution that comes back. As someone who's been involved in SMBs from the very beginning, I can understand both sides of the argument, but at the end of the day, one community is stronger than a forked one.
Completely agree. I think loved everything you said, actually. I think I agree with everything. What I think I would add is that, I mean, one reason why I'm a, say, long-term believer in DAOs is that, I think what's interesting is, like, I mean, people have been talking about communities forever, Web 2, pre-Web 2, what's different today, right? And I think it's this, one way I see it is like programmatic incentives, right? Or like where you can finally align the incentives for the creator, the owner, anyone in the community who is adding value, right, in some way, right? So and now you can have interesting ways where they can capture value for themselves, you know. So maybe I don't create the NFT, but you know, I'm really good at promoting it. I'm really good at distributing or marketing it, you know, and I can you know, capture some value out of that, right? I mean, that's going to keep me here a lot longer. You know, you can really grow like a strong, you know, not just a community of people who like what you're doing, you know. So you know, and because it's programmatic, I think the most interesting thing about this is that we, you know, I mean, we're in the very beginning, we're exploring what are these different incentives, you know. You know, it doesn't have to be royalty split, you know. You know, there could be governance things, there can be, you know, different models for earning, you know, and capturing value, and you know, and it's all composable, and it's all, you know, like, so I think there's so many interesting ways it can go, you know. So but it's going to be, we're at the very beginning, so I don't think we've really figured it out. There's going to be a lot of sort of growing pains to get there.
Yeah. My battery ran off, so I had to switch the headsets, but I used this to change my clothing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, Ben, like you said, like the incentive schemes, and like how the community and the people who are with the project can add the value. I think that's the difference between what we have earlier and what we have today. And like also, like I read a little bit about like your history of entrepreneurship, and like what you were doing, like also how you think it's design of the products. When I say design, like user experience and user design, it's important, like for us in this moment, for getting on the next level of the products that we are building in this blockchain NFT space.
Oh, I mean, it's kind of crazy that actually, I mean, one of the nice things about Solana is that the level of experience design is so far beyond, I think, what happens in Ethereum and other chains. And I honestly, I think like it's even more needed in crypto because there's so much people don't understand, and the learning curves are kind of high. And but you know, I mean, I understand the technical challenges of like coding for the blockchain make it really hard, you know. And in like in the beginning, you're just trying to keep things simple, but that means it requires people to know more, you know. But I do agree that like a lot of this is I mean, it's all going to come down to experience design, really. Actually, at the end of the day,
I agree.
like, you know, so you know, the funny thing is though, I think Jovan, when we were talking too, it's like, you know, because we look at other projects and protocols. I mean, we integrate with a lot of projects, so like we're always looking at their SDKs, the code base, and everything. And I feel like sometimes it's kind of like being a surgeon or something, like where like you know, if you're a project, you kind of know what happens behind the scenes. You can assess the quality of projects. And some projects like look good, like their UI is just really well done, but you know, maybe the amount of the amount of thought and care needed on the on-chain program isn't quite there, or the back-end ops isn't quite there, and it's something like a user is never going to know, you know. And I don't know. I feel like I don't know how to, like, there's a lot of times I see people ape into things, and we've looked at the code or we've seen things and we're like, oh wow, I, you know, can't believe these guys do this thing. But you know, but people see, you know, there's a new token launch, it's got a beautiful website, you know, and it could be some guy in his you know, some you know, you don't know the team, you know, the team's a non, you know, so it's hard to know. How does anyone know these things, you know? And I don't know, like I feel like I wish there was a way to make some of those things more obvious, but that seems to be like hard.
But you're totally on point what I wanted to hear. And Joe, you said like that you agree on this, and Vito is building with us, and we see that for users they want like more stuff. So they are helping us to get on the next level. And I think that conversation with community, it's also important to find the way for your product what you really need to have. So I think like Vito and Joe can tell us like more about this topic, about like how to fit what you think that community needs and what they really need.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, so my view on it is kind of like, I'll use a historical analogy, not that old, but in 2008, 2009, 2010 timeframe, the iPhone came out and kind of revolutionized the concept of mobile computing. And of course there was the Android as well. So you had at least, in some cases, what we forecasted would be, a 2-horse race. Yes, there was BlackBerry and Symbian and a handful of others, but really it was going to come down to iPhone and Android. And so if you were a company, you're like, oh shit, I gotta build an iPhone app. What did they do? They took their website and they shoved it into an iPhone. And why does that not work? You don't even see this today in 2022. Why is it the case? Because the form factor is a flat piece of glass, more or less, with no keyboard. Whereas a website, you have a QWERTY keyboard, a mouse, and a monitor for the most part, or a laptop, similar setup. And so the experience, the principles for that type of experience are just fundamentally different than a phone. And so over time, instead of shoving what worked in the context of a website into an application, they started to develop applications relative to the form factor and the types of experiences also that mobile devices could provide. Things like having the GPS or having cameras, etc. Like all of these different types of things that were readily available to you enable these new types of experiences. So I don't want us to forget that 15, 12, 10, 13 years ago, things were very different on mobile devices, whereas today we just take them for granted. And I think today, in the context of Web3, whether it's an NFT marketplace, it's a video game, it's a swapping capability for tokens, you can't assume that we're going to be taking all of the same UX principles from Web 2 related properties and technologies and just apply them to Web 3. Some of them will absolutely translate, but in a lot of cases, we need to rethink from a first principles perspective what the experience should actually be like. A lot of this can come from your user feedback. And I'm sure, one of the benefits that we've had over the past, call it 10, 12 years of Web 2 and cloud related technologies is we now have really good best practices on how to kind of measure how people are engaging with an application. Where are they kind of dropping off in like a checkout flow, or these types of things are well-studied areas for user design and user experience research. We need to start applying that level of rigor and thinking to Web3 related technologies so that in 5 years from now, we will just no longer take we will actually start to take the types of experiences that we have in 5 years for granted as if we've already had them. But we're sort of kind of at the beginning stages of a lot of this type of net new application development and net new experiences for users. So on the one hand, we should consistently engage with the community. On the other hand, I also want to point out, like, no customer ever asks for the iPhone is kind of like the canonical Steve Jobs quote. So there's going to be some level of innovation that needs to happen, coupled with customer feedback, and kind of blending that in a way that provides a safe and seamless experience for Web3 users.
Okay, maybe I can give a perspective from actually being in the trenches of Web3 and being there on the front lines. So what we see is that there is kind of a number of users that is climbing up, is kind of reaching a point where it's slowing down, at least in the Web3 sense. Like a lot of crypto natives that are interested in NFTs are now already on board. Like they tried it out, they purchased some of the NFTs, and we are reaching a point where we need to engage with new users. We need to bring in, new artists. We need to bring in new collectors. We need to bring in the wider public. And if we are talking about numbers, I could say that maybe on Solana, this is like, even though there are like maybe a couple of millions of wallets, we're talking about maybe a million or more real life users, I think. And if we're talking about the NFT space, we can talk about, let's say, a couple of hundreds of thousands of users. We have more than 500,000 of registered users on SolSea, but that's another topic, whether we have like fake users or not. But let's say we're talking about a couple of hundreds of thousands. But if you think about these old times of social networks, the moment that Facebook reached 1 million of users, that moment is still, to be, we are awaiting that moment in the NFT space and in any basically Web3 space, to have 1 million users using one single platform or one service. And we think that moment is upon us, but there is a significantly more job, more things for us to do in order to engage in the next 100,000 or a next 1 million. Because these people are not pretty, familiar with what is a wallet, what is not a wallet, there's a very steep learning curve when you want to engage into Web3, because you have to have, a wallet, you need to trust someone, this is money we are talking about, then this money is spent somewhere else. So this is quite different than just, promoting a next website that you can post your profile picture on. So it will demand much more efforts, and maybe even finding some ways around it. Like we had this talk about, virtual reality and the art world and these collectors that are coming in. So if you give them something around, like, hey, enter the VR, here's a VR headset, enter the gallery. Wow, can I buy an art piece here? Yeah, just open a wallet. Okay, I will open up the wallet because this is so cool for me to get into that I will spend this, additional energy, invest more our time and money into it. And maybe these ways around, creator communities, artist communities, collector communities, that will then kind of, spread it around their own home, their own work environment, saying like, hey, you need to come and see this. I think this virality will drive a big next step for the Web3, let's say, the big move. We are now, I think, at the gates, and when these gates open, we will have another, tens or hundreds of millions of users coming into Web3.
Agreed.
I just hope that we don't, as we don't lose, I would say, the degen spirit or the creative spirit that and the of Web3, and like let sort of, I don't know, the traditional commercialization of industries kind of dominate. I really hope for like a future where, if people are, say, stock investors, that it's more like a DeFi land experience, like they're farming a crop,
Right.
and it's not like, it doesn't start looking like, what investing in stocks looks like today. I feel like it all should be very different,
I
because that's sort
completely
of
agree.
this is why partly I think we're all here and we're really interested in innovating in the space, is not to bring in this, the old world in some way, but.
Ben disappeared.
Yeah, like what
I just
Ben said, like with DeFi farming, like with the crops and everything, like with DeFi land, it's a really good example of like this innovation, as Joe said, and like onboarding new people through gamification and giving them totally new experience, how they will make their rates, like interest rates and everything. I think, yeah, really good example, Ben. And like I think like we are now, or I think, I don't know, I don't have the watch in the VR, but I think we are like around a 1 hour of live stream, and I think like we can like close this this panel with every of you with way of thinking about the brave new world of NFTs, like how you see it, Ben, how you, Joe, see it, how Vito see it, and then we can close this after you three gentlemen's give me your opinion about this our brave new world of NFTs.
Can you guys see me, or am I gone?
We can hear you.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
we can
weird.
hear
Okay.
you.
We can hear you. I can see you. Yeah.
Oh, you can see me? Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't know what's going on. I mean, I'm happy to talk. I'm here. I'm here. I can hear you guys.
Okay.
Yeah. So who will start like with his vision of where are we now in this brave new world? Who
Sure.
wants
I
to
mean,
be first?
I'll jump in. So I don't even know where to start because there's so many different avenues to go down with respect to the future of NFTs. I kind of try to think of them in various buckets. One is the kind of the art world. Clearly a huge amount of interest in high art or just the call it digital art space, and that crossover into NFTs. Traditional artists actually looking to cross over into NFTs for the art's sake. Then there's the kind of the financial utility aspect of NFTs, and what does that mean? Are you going to be able to utilize NFTs as collateral to lend against? I met with a team recently that is looking to build a protocol that will enable you to post your NFTs as collateral and trade on Mango markets. It's pretty novel. In addition to that, we talked about the potential for earning yield or making an NFT a truly productive asset as a form of, instead of just a form of like, an investment as you would as a piece of art. And then another bucket that I tend to look into, and I think this is an area that I don't think a lot of people are talking about because it may not be as attractive as the previous two categories, is actually the proliferation of NFTs with brands. And I think this is one area where Solana and Metaplex and the companies that are building on Solana and Metaplex in the NFT space are really going to thrive. And I'll give you an example why. So if you go to, Starbucks, for example, and they want to do a huge airdrop of NFTs to 10 million of their customers. Can they do that on a chain that's going to cost between $100 and $500 per mint of those NFTs? I think the answer is no, because the math just doesn't work out for that type of marketing or brand activation. And so Solana has the potential to enable a new category with respect to, direct brand to customer engagement through NFTs. We haven't even really begun to see what kind of creative exploration can be done there. But I think that this is an area of growth that will kind of propel Solana as kind of the de facto standard for how companies utilize a lot of NFTs beyond just the kind of standard, hey, we're going to do like a one-of-one mint auction off for charity, or we're going to do a one-of-one mint for the Super Bowl or whatever. Like those things will continue to happen irrespective of chain. But when you want to get to kind of like your mass customer base, Solana and the Metaplex standard, in my opinion, are at least today the only real path from a budget standpoint that makes sense for a lot of brands. So I think, over the course of the next 12 to 18 months, we'll see a lot of creative exploration in this space, whether it's the high art piece, the financialization of NFTs, and then most importantly, in my view, kind of like the brands and how celebrities and entertainers also utilize NFTs at scale.
Is Ben still around? Ben, are you there?
You can't see me?
So.
I'm here.
No, we can't see you, but maybe the cameras actually can see you. We don't know. You just disappeared for
I see
me
it.
and
Yeah, I
Joe.
see the Ben.
Yeah,
I see the
Jovan
Joe. I
sees
see you.
Huh.
Maybe if Ben, you wouldn't mind, I would just jump in to kind of say a couple of words, especially after Joe said about Solana and NFTs. Joe, you kind of already kind of my opinion on all of this, but let me reiterate it here live. I don't think that what we have right now with the NFT standards is actually good enough. I think that the NFTs as they exist today and as they existed since their initiation, like on Ethereum, let's say blockchain, are not well written, well thought of, because people spend a really small amount of time thinking about like, hey, you know, an NFT as a digital certificate can be used for this or that. They just made metadata and stored it off chain actually. Okay, maybe we are now utilizing Airweave, so it's kind of, you know, on chain, but basically it's kind of stored off chain in a JSON file, and then, you know, the metadata that explains what an NFT is or gives it functionalities is not really thought of. And we know this because we come from, you know, museum industry, from art industries, from these different types of music industries. We know what these industries need in order to have the NFTs that will work for them. We discussed about license rights and having a same NFT piece, different license rights for different audiences. And they're all interlinked together in through this piece that actually, you know, like you have 5 different licenses, but they're all the same NFT. And this is just one example. If we go into the music industry and if we want to onboard large amount of artists, and let me tell you, we are working with them. You can expect some of the big names coming in to SolSea and all art, but they need better. They need better NFTs. They need new types of NFTs. They need merch NFTs. They want to sell tickets by NFTs. They want to be able to redeem the ticket once they sell the NFT. So this NFT is used. So we need to way to tag this NFT. Like, there's so many infrastructural elements that do not exist yet, not only on Solana, but also on other chains, that we cannot get to 100 million users of NFTs unless we first solve these problems and get to a point where, you know, like the interfaces are easy to use, of course. But I think that when we talk about the NFTs, Solana is definitely our choice, and definitely, as you said, like something that will make possible for, you know, so many different use cases, especially for brands. But if we're talking, for example, for brands, you know, like, you know how it looks when you sit down with a brand. It's kind of a marketing agency creative talk, you know, like we had these talks in SolSea, you know, running SolSea. Like, they sit down and they start imagining things. They start talking about, hey, can we do this? Hey, can we do that? And we're like, yes, but, you know, like, we need to develop so you will be able to do that. But can we then, you know, like, we have 200,000 of these, and then we can add 10,000 of these, and then we give them all, you know, like t-shirts. And I'm like, okay, you give them t-shirts as NFTs? Yes, we drop them t-shirts as NFTs. And then what happens? Like, what do they do with these NFTs? Well, they can get the real t-shirt. Okay, so cool, but where do they enter their address for, you know, delivery? And we don't have that. We don't have that yet. Of course, we are building it, but that's another topic. The thing is that, you know, the infrastructure is not yet there. And I think a lot of these challenges will be solved throughout this year and next year. And then we can expect the new kind of wave of innovation to come into the sector, to use these tools and, you know, infrastructural elements that will provide them capabilities to do creative things, important things.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. I mean, but I think what you're identifying is quite literally, you know, the history of how creative and ad agencies have engaged with brands on new technologies for decades. And so, for example, when mobile came out, this was the same thing that the creative agencies did with their brands. They say, we got to do something really cool and wild, and we want to be able to do all these other things. And the reality is that the technology was still relatively new, you know. So if a brand wanted to enable people to, you know, if walk into a Starbucks in 2009 with their iPhone and pay with their iPhone, that was impossible. Like, but it was an idea that they had that actually led to the market demanding this type of support for mobile devices and mobile payments. I think that's the same thing today that we're seeing with NFTs. And, like, you know, candidly, the Metaplex standard is imperfect, but it's been out for 8 months. It's not even a year-old specification. And so I think the benefit also of Metaplex being open source is that we can take the feedback from, whether it's artists, it's brands, it's musicians, it's people in finance, to start to influence the way that the evolution of the specification is going to improve over time, because it's literally open source, right? It doesn't mean that every person is going to be able to land in the specification what they want or need, but there will be a community and a level of consensus around what is actually going to be included in the specification to enable the folks that you're describing, the musicians, the folks from high art, the brands, et cetera, so that we can start to build a broader set of creative activations for these types of NFTs. I think the last thing I'll mention, though, is that, and you really brought up a good point, is they've got all these ideas. They want to add T-shirts. They want to add, mailing them to people, or they want to be able to use them as tickets and all this kind of stuff. This is exactly the type of conversation we should be having to then delineate between what should be in the NFT standard, what should be in the spec, versus what should an agency provide, or what should an infrastructure provider provide. We don't want to shove everything into the specification, because what you'll end up with is kind of like what happened with, take a look at like the Java ecosystem. Right? The Java runtime is completely shoved with a ton of stuff, and it takes forever for this thing to get up and running. Conversely, we don't want to necessarily do that with an NFT specification. We want to have the spec be able to support things in a way that can then be implemented by the creative agencies, digital agencies, brands, and et cetera.
I agree. Completely.
Wait, where the
I don't know if
cameras
you guys
go?
can see.
Are we done?
Yeah. Are we done, or what's going on?
No?
No,
Ben?
we are.
Now the cameras disappeared.
Can you guys see me?
It
I
also
still can't see you,
happened
Ben, but we can hear you.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I just
we are
wanted to.
live. Yeah, we're okay.
We're live still? Oh, okay. Well, interesting. Can't see the camera.
Yeah, I
Well,
see everybody.
I just wanted to offer a different point of view. The thing, I mean, I really like what you guys said. I think for me, I appreciate the big brands and the companies coming in as, to me, I see them as sort of the distribution or the channels for which maybe to get to the next billion or 100 million users, right? But the thing that I like, or I think resonates with me, and I guess my entrepreneurial roots or something, is just I like bottom up innovation, bottom up kind of revolutions, really. And for me, what's going on in the NFT space, which I think is this really beautiful intersection of kind of like that programmable, composable incentives, creativity around the art, ownership, and then actually what's interesting is to me is the social aspect. Like people, it's not just like one person appreciating art, but like actually a tribe, a community of people who've come together because they like they vibe, they resonate with this thing, and they vibe with each other, and they want that community, right? And for me, I think I mean, maybe this manifests itself into being a DAO or something like the DAO is like the early stages of what this eventually becomes, where it's I mean, it'd be crazy to think like maybe there's a DAO that becomes as big as Apple, right? And that's just led
awesome.
by people who are who just love, like, and actually I was speaking with one of the, I did a bunch of AMAs with some of the token communities, and one of the most fascinating things, I think this was with the, I think this could have been with the Oogie Coin guys, but like the initial creator abandoned the project, and then the community itself came together, and created a community wallet, and then started like just pushing the token, like growing the audience, building value, building out, and nobody is the creator, like it's literally the community. Just if they wanted to get something out of this, they had to come together and do this, and they literally did. And I'm like, wow, this is incredible. Like I couldn't even believe it. And they're much stronger now because of that. So I can't wait for some huge DAO to form. Anyway.
Yeah, this is good example.
No. Joe is off.
Joe is off. Yeah, Joe's gone.
I think the batteries
No
are
worries.
pretty
Guys?
big problem with Quest
Yeah, I
because they
lost you
last
for a
an hour.
second.
Oh yeah, I'm
Like,
plugged
yeah.
in actually.
I want to say I was like really excited to be part of this conversation in virtual reality with such a great panelist. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Vito. It was like really pleasure hosting you here, and I hope we will organize something like this soon again. And I think this is really great stuff to explore and to have like more chat about the things that we are covering with our daily life and work. But this is like more about the vision and bigger story. Thank you guys. If you have
Yeah,
something
thank you for
to
having me.
say, and then we can
Yeah,
go.
I can just say, of course, thank you in the name of All Art and SolSea for everybody that was joining us also live. I hope that cameras are still here with us, and thank you, Jovan, for taking the lead. Ben and Joe that disappeared, and Ben is a ghost right now. But I just wanted to say that we should kind of have these. We will experiment a lot more with these virtual events, and
Yeah.
to close down the conference, I could say that this has been
Oh, I can't hear you
tremendously
anymore.
new experience for all of us. We all did in our lives, Jovan, myself, and the team that is behind the scenes in Dubai and also in Belgrade. We've done events, like we've done conferences, we've done live events for brands and things, but we never experienced something like this. Like meeting in VR, having the panel after panel after panel in VR. We could do so much more with these virtual events. Like we can have these exhibitions that are then, openings of the exhibitions that are live from virtual reality, where people meet from all around the world in one space, have a conversation. Then there is a panel. Then there is a kind of a kitchen, like we having a party, and then there is a kitchen there. And then, like the camera comes into the kitchen and it's all live on YouTube when avatars are talking in these virtual spaces. So I think that we will see more of these kind of experiences, especially because some of them we're going to build and kind of experiment with. So thanks again for everybody, to everybody, and I'd like to welcome you on the virtual exhibitions on SolSea, and follow what we're doing. And Ben, thank you again. And Joe, I mean, probably you're live now on YouTube, but yeah, thanks. Go on, thanks.
Yeah, Vito, Jovan,
Guys,
thank you for inviting me.
so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Like I can't wait
Thank
for the
you,
next one.
Ben.
Please feel free to invite me. I think it'd be cool, by the way, if our avatars were NFTs, and maybe I could have like my favorite NFT. Or
They will be. They will be very soon.
That would be insane.
So, yeah.
Cool.
Yes.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
So yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Like they say, like this is folks for tonight, and hope to see you soon. Bye.
Bye.